We've got Setuf, she, her. Now, Setuf is called into some other shows. I don't know if it was Truth Wanted or not. But anyway, Setuf wants to know if we think theism is illogical, and if so, why?
Oh, cool. It's a fun question.
Okay, so Setuf, you're on the air.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
How are you, Stu?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Great.
What do you got for us tonight?
Yeah, so I want to start the question with whether or not you guys believe theism is illogical.
Shannon?
I don't think that it comports to logic. If I thought it was logical, like if I thought it was, sound, I would be a theist. So no, I don't.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Do you follow up?
Okay, so yeah, I just want to understand, like, were you guys always atheists, or was there a time where you were believers?
I used to be a Catholic. I was a Catholic for like 18 years. And then I went to undergrad and started studying science and started thinking about things. And then I lost that.
I was an Anglican. I was an Anglican for until probably my mid to late 20s. And then I kind of fell out of that as I was studying neuroscience, but similar trajectory. A lot of things didn't make sense to me. And then I started to kind of explore other religions to see if maybe those might fit. And ultimately, I just did none of them made sense based on what I knew about how the material world and specifically our brains operate. It just started to seem like it was not only unnecessary and superfluous, but contradictory, like internally inconsistent, and in many ways kind of fantastically nonsensical.
What do you think, Setuf?
Yeah, so almost similar. So you would say like almost obviously illogical, right, at this point. But what I want to understand is, like, did anything change with the logic, or is it just because you had maybe thought about it a bit deeper?
I think it's because I thought about it more deeply, and I became more exposed to scientific discoveries and knowledge. And so I've obviously had like personally, I've had a long period of like scientific education. I'm like going into my, 13th post-secondary year of education or something now. And it's shocking the transition that happens when you start to develop like a thorough understanding of the natural world. And you get this, like, for me at least, I got this gestalt of what makes sense. And like people call it your bullshit detector. And once you pick up your bullshit detector, suddenly you start detecting bullshit everywhere. And it really makes it hard to see the world as it used to be. So, for me, the Catholicism left when I developed that, but so did a whole bunch of other things. Like, I don't know, I used to have some vague notions about souls, and I used to have some vague notions about like, there being energy and like, these other things. And then when you start to really study and dig in and don't just believe things based on how you feel about them, but based on what makes sense and what we know about reality, then, everything sort of goes with it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say thanks so much for opening up and sharing so much of your journeys. So here is a question that I believe is even more interesting than the ones that have preceded. And that is, do you guys believe that you could currently hold any strong beliefs that are as obviously illogical as your religious beliefs prior to thinking about them a bit deeper?
To me, that's just like saying, could you be wrong about something again? And yes, of course I could. Like I'm probably wrong about. I'm probably mentally holding a belief right now that is wrong when I'm. If I were to let's look at it this way. So I'm probably holding a belief, let's say like belief X, that may or may not be a strong belief, but is based on potentially limited information or secondhand information. The way that I kind of operate is when I have access to more information, I reassess. That's what happened with my belief in God. I started to have access to myriad variety of information comparatively, and I realized I kind of previously took for granted that things that were told to me were true, and I started to reassess. Now, I did that with that belief. Are there other beliefs that were instilled within me in the past, or are currently instilled with me, or whatever, that maybe I should go through that process with? Sure. It's all about information access. So I could hold a belief that I currently think is logical. Like, I don't think I hold any illogical beliefs. Nobody does, right? Nobody says, this doesn't make sense, but I believe it anyway. That's just not the way that people operate.
Yeah.
No, they say they have faith instead.
But I'm ching. Yes. That's funny. Okay. Yeah. But so, yeah, could I be wrong is I think the way that I'm reading that question. And yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And if I had access to more information, I would do my best to change that so that I can be right.
And so for me, the more I learn, the more I learn about science, about the process of science, and about epistemology and things, the less sure I am in general about anything. Right? The more you see that there's not so many absolutes. It's all pretty nuanced. All of our knowledge is sort of asymptotic. We're just we're never going to get that absolute certainty. We're just going to get a little bit more and more sure, and it's diminishing returns whenever we do it. So I think that I will never be as sure about anything as I was in the past. And I think that's only going to continue.
That's such a remarkably good point. I love that point. Because I think it's so true.
Yeah.
The more you start to learn about things that you thought were transparently easy to understand, and the more you start to see the finite details and critically analyze each one, kind of look at them under a microscope, the more you're like, oh man,
yeah. And you can do this sort of thing. Yeah, you can do this sort of thing yourself, right? Next time you see, say, a news article reporting on even a scientific finding or not, right? Just follow their sources. And you'd be amazed at what makes a headline, and when you follow it back, it turns out to be 4 out of 5 mice died in one group versus 5 out of 5 mice died in another group. And as someone who works with a lot of mice, sometimes they just die for no particular reason at all, and you have to interpret it all in the context of the experimental conditions and blah 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 blah. But the point is that this stuff gets really overblown, and when it's reported in mass media, it's reported as very definite and absolute, and it's not the way that things are usually. So next time you see something that seems remarkable and definite, just dig down a little deeper and follow those sources all the way back to where they started from, and you'd be amazed at what you find.
Yeah, I agree. Should be a Grayman Festival.
True.
What do you think, Setuf?
So yeah, thanks for that. I do agree with that a lot. Actually, I can relate with that quite a lot. But as you guys could imagine, I do have actually a topic in mind where I believe if you guys were to think about it more and make your research and really check the sources and check if maybe your current beliefs are fallacious, that you would come to a much more different conclusion that you are probably having now. I mean, I don't know you guys so well, but statistically,
are you talking about a belief in a god?
No. I'm talking about carnism, the belief system that conditions people to eat certain animals but not others. So basically, why do we kill dogs but not pigs? There's no logical difference there, especially if it's not necessary, which the science shows.
I agree. There's no logical difference between eating dogs and eating pigs. Except that we have a relationship. Some people have relationships with dogs, and probably more people have relationships with dogs than have relationships with pigs.
I'm not fully following that the science doesn't bear it out. Like I don't know if you know what tryptophan is. So what tryptophan is like basically like a chemical that's predominantly in meats, right? So we metabolize tryptophan, and when we metabolize tryptophan, it produces a chemical in our brain, and it's the primary source of a chemical in our brain called serotonin. So if we don't have an appropriate amount of something that contains tryptophan in our diet, then we're not going to metabolize enough serotonin for our brains to function optimally. And I know that people will say that you can get it from other sources like soy and stuff like that, but we don't metabolize it necessarily as well. There's also people who have, I mean, it seems like a veganism, like I understand from a moral perspective, but from a practical perspective, it seems like a privileged position to hold, because there's so many people who have medical reasons why it's difficult for them to correctly absorb the appropriate amount of vitamins, for example, or chemicals that are within food, or proteins, that are within food that we metabolize into chemicals that we use like physiologically and neurologically from supplemental sources, because of the way our bodies operate. We're omnivores, right? So we developed in a way that we're made essentially. Well, made is probably a poor choice of words, but like we're evolved to metabolize these substances from meat. So I like I said, I understand it from a moral perspective, but I think people maybe go a bridge too far when they say, well, there is no reason and no one has an excuse. I think that is way too black and white, and it's an exceptionally privileged position to have. To even be able to make that argument, and it's not super informed. Like, what science says that no one needs meat?
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, Shannon. I mean,
you're a doctor. Back me up.
and I'm in a camp of people who probably couldn't be vegetarian for like medical reasons. But like, there's tons of reasons why a person couldn't be vegetarian, certainly easily. And frankly, the solutions we have to some of the limitations to like vegetarianism are not that great. And I sort of think of vegetarianism as like a new technology, right? So the people who are current vegetarians are early adopters. They're going to be working out the bugs and the kinks, and they're going to be figuring out how to do vegetarianism well. And then eventually, I imagine, society as a whole, or I guess I hope from an ethical standpoint, that society as a whole sort of figures out how to do vegetarianism best, whether that means that we don't eat meat of any kind, or if we eat lab-grown meat, or if we, do it some other way that's more ethically defensible. I think that's the direction we're going, and we just have to develop the technology and scale it up to the point where we can actually sustainably feed people. Because I don't think that, vegetarianism is practical from the majority of the population, even just from like a caloric density perspective.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I understand it ethically and morally. And like, if I could wave a wand and make it so that, we had lab grown meat or that our bodies operated differently, I mean, maybe I would. And I am a meat eater. I also have multiple sclerosis, so I have to be careful with what I eat too, because I want to prevent demyelination. Pardon me. So that's one of the reasons I kind of think it's a privileged position. Like, so, okay, back to my original point. I could look at Shannon goes down rabbit holes. So like, I talked myself out of my point. My point was that ethically, I totally understand it. Like, I get the argument. And if I could wave a wand and feel like nobody needed it, maybe I would. Maybe I'm even a hypocrite currently, and I'm willing to own that because I do eat meat. But I also think that if you want to have a strong argument, and what you're saying is that things are logically inconsistent, to say that there's no scientific evidence in a conversation where we opened it talking about logic, that anybody needs meat for any reason, that's not a sound argument. Like, that's way too black and white. And maybe your argument should have a bit more more nuance to it and take those things into account.
Maybe we can ask Setuf, can you clarify what you meant by there's no scientific reason why we need to eat meat?
Yeah, good point.
Yes, thank you for that. So you guys said quite a lot there.
Yeah.
I just want to address the point where you said, like there's some people with health conditions. Yes, I recognize this, and we are talking about necessity. We are saying, or I am saying, if it is not necessary for your health or well-being to kill animals, it is therefore morally wrong. And there's no difference between killing a pig or killing a dog to eat it. Because at that point, if there's no necessity, we are basically doing it either for pleasure, for convenience, or tradition, right? So
you would just to clarify case by case then, right? Like on an individual level. I just want to make sure I'm understanding before you go on, and then I'll shut up, I promise. So you just mean case by case when you say necessity, right? So that's not a unilateral declaration for all humans ever.
Yeah.
You're saying like on an individual level, if you can. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I understood your point. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make sure I got it.
You can be healthy. And as far as I know, this is the vast majority of the population, especially people who have access to supermarkets. They have the choice in the supermarket to either pay for animal abuse or not to pay for animal abuse unnecessarily. So, and also to answer your question, what I meant with is the scientific consensus. There are many, many scientific studies, but I'm just going to quote the American Dietetics and Nutritionists Association, which is a body of over 100,000 certified nutritionists, right? Not doctors, because doctors barely get any nutritional training during their school, but nutritionists. And their is that
take that.
A vegan diet is adequate. A vegan diet is adequate for all stages of life, pregnancy, infancy, when you're an adult, and as a sports person, and can even have beneficial health effects, including reducing type 2 diabetes and certain types of cancers.
That's because it's lower sugar and lower fat. So that makes sense.
So,
I mean, it's a lot of. I generally agree. Sorry, go ahead, Shannon.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I just have this is a question that I always think about when it comes to this. I refer everything back to brains because I'm a loser, and that's the metric through which I measure just about everything. So, are there any longitudinal studies, like when it comes generationally, I guess would be the best way to do it. I'm not even sure how it would work. About the impacts on a neurological level, like when it comes to chemical transmission and the production of chemicals in the brain, which are inarguably very, very important, but wouldn't be something that a nutritionist studies, because nutritionists mostly study general overall health, not the physical construction and impacts of the brain. Like we know for a fact, like just a fact, that part of like the massive blossoming of our brain development took place because we had the ability to start cooking meat that we then metabolized differently. Like that's just almost inarguable from like an evolutionary biology, neurology, and science perspective. That's just a thing that happened. And that created like this huge blossoming of cognitive activity and ability. So do we know that if we cease eating meat in the long term, like as a species in general, that there's not going to be some sort of negative overall or impact or deleterious effect to how our brain operates and what type of chemicals that we produce and where we source those chemicals from, and if there's any kind of difference?
I don't know if that was rhetorical.
If we know
no, it's true. It's a legit question because look, we tend to look at things like very like in the now, I think, right? So we're looking at like today, if I started eating vegan, would I physiologically basically be the same as I was probably yesterday? And the answer is probably yes. Like maybe I'd have less sugar and fat, so I'd probably lose some weight too, and maybe I don't know. There's probably other things that like interact with it. Like, you know, it's nuanced. But if we as a society transition to eating only vegan and stopped eating meat, which is kind of what our bodies are geared towards and what feeds our brain, like literally feeds our brain neurochemicals, is there some sort of like, are we not thinking about what those impacts may be?
I mean, the other thing that I wanted to jump in on is Setuf, you quoted this dietitians organization about a vegan diet, but I think that's pretty vague, right? Like there are like vegan diets are not uniform, right? Just like omnivorous diets are not uniform, right? My diet, if I eat like say like turkey and salads regularly, is very different from someone who eats a hamburger every day, right? And I think similarly, vegan diets are going to be variable in their quality. So I don't know how you can draw any real conclusions off of such a general statement. This is the problem with nutritional studies is it's so hard to follow and track the impact of a bunch of meals, right? That people are very poor at reporting generally, and the diets are so variable between people.
Can I clarify?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes, I can clarify. So, I was quoting this. I didn't quote it entirely. I mean, all these questions that you guys have, they are very valid and legit. And I encourage you after this call to really make your research and find out if Setuf is talking bull or if there's any merit to all of the things. But just to answer your question, so I made. To clarify, veganism is not a diet. It's a moral philosophy, which just means that you live in a way where you don't pay for animals to be killed unnecessarily. That's all it means. And then the diet follows from that. So what I meant with the dietitian association statement, which is, by the way, based on over 100 peer-reviewed studies on this thing, right? What I meant there is a whole food, plant-based diet. Right, because you could eat Oreos all day and you would be vegan, right?
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a well-balanced, whole food, well-planned.
Oh, you cut off a little bit there.
Still there, Setuf?
Uh-oh.
We may have lost.
Oh my gosh,
Setuf.
We have way more calls, and
Hello?
I can see calls ticking up on the screen.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think I'd even disagree with you, like from a moral perspective. Yeah, we can hear you again now. You should have. It's too bad Dan's not here because Dan would have just been. I'm pretty sure Dan's vegan.
Yeah. I mean, Setuf, I don't think we have a fundamental disagreement about the ethics of this. I think our disagreement is practical, and so I mean, your point is well taken. I think. Go ahead.
I just want to ask one last question to make sure that we do agree on the morals. Then, because would you say that if I go to the supermarket and buy a steak, would you say that is a wrong action?
Depends what you mean by wrong.
No. Because you're taking all the nuance out of it to do that, right? Like you said it was on an individual case-by-case basis before, right? So you said when necessary before.
Yeah.
So I guess you would have to qualify that with whether or not it was necessary. Yes. So if it's necessary for you to be healthy,
in a supermarket.
Then
I have supermarket.
I buy mine from a local farm because I prefer not to support factory farming. So I buy a local farm. That's right. But that's a privileged position for me too because I live in the country surrounded by farms. So I'm able to do that and support that instead.
And you probably pay more for that, right?
I do.
So we don't agree on the morals.
I don't even know that we don't. No, I think that we do if you're sticking to your original position, which is that if it's necessary, then I think that we do agree. But you removed that as a component of your question and just generally and unilaterally said, if I walk into a supermarket without giving any context as to whether or not it was necessary, and then acted as though those two positions were interchangeable, and then said I disagreed.
No, but in the supermarket, I've got the option of a steak or beans, lentils, whatever else there is in the supermarket. That is why.
So do you need the meat? Do you need the meat to be healthy? Like, so are you changing your previous position then that it's okay to eat meat if it's necessary for you to be healthy?
I never said it wasn't.
You said, so if it's necessary for you to be healthy to eat meat,
it's not necessary.
Right. Okay. So when you walk into the supermarket and you're making a choice to eat meat, is that necessary? Yeah. So do you agree or disagree that there are going to be instances where eating meat for someone to be healthy is necessary? Yes. That's yes or no.
Yeah, probably like in 1%. In 1% of the population, probably yes.
Okay, but that there are instances where it is necessary. So the answer to my question would be contingent on that as a stipulation. So is it or is it not necessary for you to eat that to be healthy? So if it is necessary, then I would say, yeah, absolutely, you're fine. If it's not necessary, then I think that you and I would probably align a little bit better, but I'm more of a hypocrite and I would probably buy it even though it's not necessary. That means that I have to probably do a little bit more self-analysis. I own that. I'm not standing here thinking I'm morally superior. I don't want to eat, and there's all kinds of really good reasons I'm eating meat. Like, I'm not one of those people. I don't I try to make the best choices I can. I know that I have MS. I know a bit about brains, and I justify it to myself day after day, even though maybe it's not justifiable from your perspective.
That's my answer. All right, Setuf, thanks for
your
call. I don't want to. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we have to keep moving. We got lots of calls. I appreciate your call, and and I encourage you to call back in next time because this is an interesting conversation, and I'm happy to continue it.